Magic Tree House. Time of the Turtle King. Written by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 9. The Turtle King. "Over here, team," Jack shouted. He rose to his feet as Annie and the soldiers raced around the rocks. "I found the last tortoise," he said. "It was hiding under a ledge." "Excellent, good work," said Cruz. "Pinto and I can carry it to the chopper. But we have to hurry, we're running out of time." "Okay, but go easy," said Jack. "I'm guessing it's at least 150 years old. The shell is softer than you'd think. It's made of honeycomb structures, very strong but not rigid." "Understood," said Pinto. He and Cruz gripped the big round shell. Then, very carefully, they lifted the giant tortoise off the ground. "Ah," said Jack, "he's a male. His belly curves inward." "So he's a king," Annie murmured to Jack. "I know," said Jack. "A great king." "Let's grab some grass for his crate," said Annie. "Go slow and low," Jack instructed the soldiers. "We'll gather some natural bedding. Meet you at the chopper." Annie and Jack pulled handfuls of tall grass from the scrubby ground. They hurried through the smoke to the helicopter, opened a side door, and climbed into the cargo area. Jack and Annie spread the grass on the bottom of a crate. "A bed fit for a king," said Annie. "Yep, he deserves the best," said Jack. The soldiers carried the giant tortoise to the cargo section. They lifted the creature and carefully placed him in the crate. Then they strapped him inside to keep him safe for the flight. Pinto made a call from the helicopter phone. Cruz wrote notes on a clipboard. While the soldiers were busy, Jack and Annie looked at the tortoise. The Turtle King peered back at them. His head bobbed up and down. "That movement means he's relaxed," said Annie. "I know," said Jack. "He trusts us." The tortoise lowered his head, resting it on the soft grass in his crate. He closed his eyes. "I know what he's thinking," said Jack. "Really? You do?" said Annie. "He's thinking, 'I'll take a little nap until this part is over,'" said Jack. "Then I'll be in a safe place. I'll sit in the sun, and they'll give me something good to eat." Annie laughed. "You know him pretty well," she said. "Hurry," shouted Cruz. "Climb inside. The lava's almost here." The soldier closed the door to the cargo section. Jack and Annie scrambled into their seats and put their helmets on. "Okay, all set," said Pinto, hanging up the phone. "We have permission to fly him to the Tortoise Center." The rotor blades started to spin. With a loud roaring and a chopping sound, the helicopter lifted off Blue Hill. It carried them all away from the river of molten lava. The helicopter flew over the broad slope of the volcano. It flew over rugged flatlands with patches of green. It flew along the coastline and over the lagoon. Finally, the helicopter hovered above the grounds of the giant Tortoise Center. Jack saw the tourists below. They were sitting in the grass, eating boxed lunches. As the helicopter started to land, they held onto their hats and scurried out of the way, leaving their lunches behind. The chopper blades finally slowed to a stop. The soldiers, Jack, and Annie jumped out. Carmen rushed forward to greet them. "We saved the last one," Annie said. "He's in the back." Carmen burst into tears. She hugged Annie and Jack. "Thank you," she said, wiping her eyes. "Thank you so much." Pinto opened the cargo section. By now, the tourists were clamoring around the helicopter. They craned their necks to see the giant tortoise inside. "No photos of him," Annie reminded them. "And please keep your voices down," said Jack. The soldiers lifted the heavy creature out of the crate. They lowered him to the ground. Everyone clapped. Jack held up his hand and tapped his finger on his lips. The tourists quickly stopped making noise. The tortoise stretched out his neck. He slowly moved his head from side to side. Again, his mouth formed the shape of a crooked smile. Some tourists laughed quietly. The red-haired woman started to cry. Her daughter wept too. "Carmen told us what you were doing," the red-haired woman said to Jack and Annie. "We've all been so worried." Great job, the large man said in a soft voice. "You guys rock," said the teenage girl, sniffling. "How did you land the chopper on a volcano?" the old man asked Cruz. "How much lava was there?" asked the woman in the sun hat. The soldiers started answering the tourists' questions about the rescue mission. Carmen turned to Jack and Annie. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "I'm sure everyone at the National Park Service is grateful for your heroism. We try night and day to care for these miraculous creatures." "We know," said Annie. "That's why we can't thank you enough for the work you do. And Pinto and Cruz, too." "Oh, yes, I must go congratulate them," said Carmen. She joined the others gathered around the soldiers. By now, the teenage girl was laughing and chatting with Pinto. "Let's go tell the king goodbye," said Annie. Jack took a deep breath. "Right," he said. He and Annie slipped over to the tortoise. They knelt down. Jack looked into the creature's shining black eyes. "You're in good hands now," Jack said softly. "Don't worry. One day, your home will be safe again, and you can go back to Blue Hill, where you've lived for 150 years. But for now, just try to enjoy yourself," said Annie. "Think of this as a vacation, Your Majesty, with nice people who love you." "And remember," said Jack, "you're very brave. You're very wise. You know exactly how to be a giant tortoise. In fact, you are the real world turtle expert." The tortoise blinked. Again, he looked as if he were smiling. "Goodbye," Jack whispered. "We have to go now." A few tourists wandered over to the tortoise, and Jack and Annie backed away. To his surprise, Jack felt close to tears again. "Let's go," he said. "Thanks, guys. Bye," Annie yelled to Pinto and Cruz. She held up her 2 thumbs. The Special Forces soldiers saluted them. "Bye, Carmen," yelled Annie. "Pleasure working with you. If you need further assistance, just go," Jack said, giving Annie a nudge. Without another word, they gave a final wave and hurried away from the giant tortoise center. Chapter 10. A Lucky Break. Jack and Annie headed back into the dry, mossy forest. They hurried past bright yellow iguanas and long green lizards. They walked over the boardwalk and through the lagoon with flamingos and herons. They hurried under the archway of trees and into the small town. They passed the shops and stepped onto the beach. They passed the boat dock and the brown pelicans and started down the shore. Jack and Annie zigzagged around all the friendly, fearless creatures. Sea lions and sandpipers, birds with blue feet, gulls picking at seaweed, and pink lizards sunning in the sand. Finally, they came to their palm tree. They climbed up the rope ladder and into the treehouse. "We made it," said Jack. "We did," Annie said breathlessly. "We can take these off now." She pulled off her World Turtle Expert badge. Jack took his off too. He breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't feel nearly as smart, but he felt happy. "Can you believe what happened today?" said Annie, grinning. "Everyone thought we were turtle experts." "Everyone except the Turtle King," said Jack. "He saw my real self." "I know he did," Annie said. She smiled. "Ready to go?" "Yep." Jack grabbed the Pennsylvania book. Together, he and Annie looked out the treehouse window. The huge albatross was circling in the blue sky. "Goodbye," Annie shouted to the bird. "Thanks for bringing us to the Enchanted Islands." Jack found the photo of Frog Creek and pointed to it. "I wish we could go there," he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. The gray early morning air was chilly. Jack and Annie were wearing their own clothes again. A breeze shook the leaves of the oak tree. While they'd been gone, no time at all had passed in Frog Creek. "That was fun," said Annie. Jack smiled and nodded. But their trip to the Galapagos had been more than just fun, he thought. He'd never forget his moment alone with the giant tortoise. He didn't have words for it. Annie seemed to guess his thoughts. "You did a good job," said Annie. "You saved him." "We all did," said Jack. "But you did something special. You got him to trust you," said Annie. "I don't know how. I wasn't an expert when I found him," said Jack. "Without my badge, I felt really scared and confused." "I know, but losing your badge was a very lucky break," said Annie. "Why lucky?" asked Jack. "If you hadn't been looking for it, you wouldn't have found him," said Annie. "Oh, okay, that's true," said Jack. "There's more," said Annie. "Do you still have the note from Morgan?" Jack checked his back pocket. "Yep, it's here," he said. He handed the note to Annie. She read the last 4 lines to him. "Be honest and gentle. No need to be smart. Just look eye to eye and talk heart to heart." "See, you did just what Morgan wanted," said Annie. "To get to the volcano, we had to be world turtle experts." "Yeah, our knowledge put us in the right place at the right time," said Jack. "And it helped Pinto and Cruz land in the right spot on the volcano." "Exactly," said Annie. "But in the most important moment, you were not an expert. You were just yourself. Without even thinking of Morgan's rhyme, you spoke to the giant tortoise from your heart, and the heart of the tortoise heard you, and he came out from his hiding place." Jack nodded. He remembered the creature's brilliant black eyes, his sweet crooked smile. "I guess you're right," he said softly. "I guess you could say we trusted each other." "Yes, I could say that," said Annie. "I'll never forget him," said Jack. "He won't forget you either," said Annie. Tears came to Jack's eyes again. He quickly wiped them away. "Hey," Annie put her hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to cry," she said. Jack shook his head. "Experts don't cry," he said. "Sometimes they do," said Annie. Jack barely nodded. "Like right now, I'll bet experts are crying all across America," said Annie. Jack couldn't help laughing. "Okay," Let's go, he said, standing up. We have to hurry. Yeah, we have to eat breakfast before school, said Annie, following him. I'm starving. Me too, said Jack. He started down the ladder. Annie followed him, and they walked quickly through the woods. We'll wake Mom and Dad up, said Annie, and we'll say, Good morning. We love you. Now please go make us some pancakes. With blueberries, said Jack. Bananas and walnuts, said Annie. With maple syrup, said Jack. With everything, said Annie. And in the early September light, Jack and Annie ran toward home.